Hey folks, it's Kary Oberbrunner. I have with me a fantastic guest. Oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this interview for about 30 days. He just got back from travels. My guest is Zoltan. Zoltan, is it Istvan?
Yes, that's perfect.
Awesome. Where'd you just come from? And I know we're going to dive into some crazy topics here, but where did you just come back from?
Well, I'm turning 50 in about 10 days. And so I kind of treated myself. I was skiing in Andermatt, Switzerland with my family. Then I had a week of surfing in Spain. And then I had a week of studies for my graduate degree at Oxford, University of Oxford in philosophy. So I have had a fun 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. Well, I found you from my friend Tyler, and Tyler interviewed you, but actually I knew about you for a while, and here's why. I started my own studies on transhumanism because I wrote a book on blockchain life. And as part of Web3, I believe that transhumanism is a component of where things are going. I mean, you see probably the word search for transhumanism, and it's like, it's starting to go up. So I know this is an edgy topic. We're going to get into some edgy things, but you were actually somebody who in 2016, you took a bus, you turned it into a life-size coffin, and you became a presidential candidate for the Transhumanism Party. Give us 60 seconds on that, man. How was that?
It was really great. Basically, the whole thing about transhumanism is trying to fight for life extension. And so we're trying to overcome death with science. And so we thought the very best way to travel around the country was using a giant bus that was shaped like a coffin. And it got a lot of attention. So that was kind of the campaign bus.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, you gave me permission to push a little bit, so I'm going to push a little bit. So some people will say, hey, man, life extension, where is that coming from? I don't want to live forever. Some people are like, I don't want to die. But do you think that it's unnatural to live forever?
No, I mean, I think, I think living forever is something, well, first off, it's not that we want to live forever. It's kind of that we want to embrace extreme longevity and kind of find a world that we want to live in as long as possible. And so that's really what, transhumanism and life extension is about, is trying to find the balance. But we say forever because it's hard to imagine wanting to die.
Yeah. I saw your Amazon Prime special, and I'm telling you what, man, it was deeply engaging. Whoever did the cinematography, the storyline, it was truly fantastic. But you have this very emotional point of the film where in the course of the documentary, your dad passes.
Yeah, that was sad. It's funny. I had a long dream about him last night. Yeah, I mean, that's sad. It makes me a little sad. So hopefully I won't tear it. But,
Yeah.
It's tough. Here I am campaigning for life extension on the Immortality bus. We're reaching millions of Americans. New York Times, The Spiegel, Vox, all these people are embedded with us. It was our campaign was very successful for being a third party candidacy, and we were getting a lot of news. But at the same time, for campaigning for immortality or indefinite lifespan, my father's dying and eventually dies in the film. So there's this juxtaposition in the film that's quite dramatic. And dramatic for me because, here I am doing these two things. But my dad had already, he died from his 5th heart attack. So we knew already that there was no way for him to recover. That's the problem with aging, is that we haven't figured out a way to reverse it. And so even if you can make people live a lot longer, it's sad because, people die all the time.
Yeah. So I would say that transhumanism in its essence, I mean, it's not, listen, I come from a theological background, so that's my past, and some of my audience comes from that background. Can you be a Christian transhumanist? In other words, are those like two things that are not supposed to happen together, or do you think it's actually becoming popularized in other examples?
Well, I absolutely think it can happen. I think the key, though, is that transhumanism has definitely started as a secular type of movement, but it's grown so complex. You starting to talk about 3D bioprinting of entire humans, entire brains. You're using virtual reality for teaching in church, getting to know God. I mean, there's just this synergy, there's merger happening. And I feel that, knowing God, and I was raised in a Catholic school and all these things. And even though I'm mostly an atheist now,
Yeah.
I'm more an agnostic. I really
I
have
hear
no
what you
idea.
mean. Yeah.
But I do believe that if you want to get spiritual and you want to get to know God, then there's absolutely no reason that technology that God would have allowed on planet Earth is a way to find, spirituality, and maybe find a way to him or her, and or whatever God is. And so I absolutely think the two can be done, but I think there has to be a little bit more caution. It's not like applying cancer therapy to cancer. Finding God through technology is challenging for many Christians, because a lot of Christians believe that technology can also be used for wicked ways, or through Satan or evil ways. And there's where I think the crux is. But I think if you done properly, there's no question you can make people more spiritual or closer or better human beings through technology. And I see absolutely no reason why you can't get to know God better through different types of technologies, if God exists.
Yeah. Well, listen, I could tell that when I read some of your work, I could tell where you're coming from, meaning your worldview is different than mine. But I love that we can have a chat here today, because I think technology is fascinating. And I think, for me, I think God's fascinating. And so I think blending the two actually is pretty cool. But let's talk about some of these boundaries, because I guess most listeners would say right now, if somebody blows off their leg in a military situation, to put on a prosthetic that has brain computer interface technology, where the person actually begins to feel like this is part of their body now, and the brain starts thinking that way, I think everybody here would say that's cool. The question is, what happens when that leg can make you run 1 minute miles and squat 5,000 pounds? And then we say, well, I just want those legs. I mean, heck with it. I don't need to blow off my legs. I want to actually have them removed intentionally. Where are we with this? And I'm sure I'm only talking about that much. You probably know this much about machine.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if this year or next year you hear about some of the very first biohackers that electively replace a limb. Again, it would be totally different than like a soldier in the battlefield who loses a limb and then puts on a prosthetic one. We're talking about people doing it because they want to be cyborgs, and already people are doing things. I have, for example, a chip implant. This was an elective thing. I can trade Bitcoin, or I can use my passwords, or start a car with it. So there's all sorts of fun things, but I think people will be taking it to the next level in terms of limbs. And the limbs aren't good enough, though, to be better than your human limbs, but they could be in 7 to 10 years. So there will be people that will just be the very first ones. And look, I support people doing that, just like I would support people maybe changing their sexes, or maybe changing their gender, changing their bodies. I mean, I'm not telling people they should do this, because I'm kind of I come from a libertarian mindset. But I'm still a pretty normal person. But I think anyone that wants to do anything with technology should be allowed to do it. But that doesn't mean that just because you should. There should be some limits. I think I would never replace my arm with an inferior robotic arm just because I think it's cool or be fun at a party. I would only do it if it's actually stronger, and let's say I can throw a football much more accurately or something, or play the piano better. Then I might consider doing it. And I think that's where we have to be careful that people don't misuse transhumanism, give it a bad name just for show. There's all these people with funny things all over their heads and tattoos, and some have microchips all over, but a lot of it's not really useful. So as a transhumanist, I support it, but I don't actually see why anyone would do it yet. So I think that's really an important line, that people remain rational and reasonable as they use technology to upgrade themselves, in the same way that you wouldn't take a cancer treatment if you didn't have cancer. So you want to make sure that you stay reasonable. And I think transhumanists get a much better name if they stay rational and don't do wild, crazy things just because they're fun party tricks.
So you really, just like with a lot of NFTs and Web3, you're playing the utility card and saying, look, if there's utility behind transhumanism, it makes sense. But if not, let's not just have it be a fad.
100%. I'm a utilitarian, kind of at the core, where and that's really why I'm interested in transhumanism and life extension. I simply don't want to die. I love life. Therefore, I want to find a method to live longer and live better. But it's not a weird thing, or like, so, I think there are some transhumanists out there that, like, I heard of some person having 50 different implants, but I know from fact that that just wouldn't be very useful, even though, you can free to do what you want with your body. I think when it becomes useful is when we can start using it in our, for example, if you and I could have a brain implant and we could do this podcast through our brains, that might be really useful. We wouldn't be paying certain fees. We wouldn't need an iPhone or whatever. So there might be reasons to do that. And I just think that's really important, because I do see that there's a lot of showiness in transhumanism. It's a lot of peacock feathers is what I like to say. People want to show, like, look what I've done. And I'm like, well, why'd you do it? It doesn't help you any. So I think as a science-minded person, I want to remain bound to earth, but ready to take off if something makes sense from a functional perspective.
A lot of times we see movies and film just a few years ahead of where we are. And we've seen some films about humans having relationships with technology, whether it was, Joaquin Phoenix, having a relationship with his essentially Siri or something like that. Other movies out there where, is this coming? Human human engagement, human relationships, human sex with robots. Where is the line?
Right. Well, I think, the line is probably, hopefully, where it's utilitarian. If it makes sense to do so for, whatever reason you want to make it, but hopefully not something just peacocky and showy, then it makes sense. Again, for me, transhumanism is really about living a better life. And I don't mean living a better life because I have psychological issues or I have neurological problems. I mean living a better life. I'm already a nice, healthy human being, but I do have a problem. For example, I'm a big wave surfer and I can't hold my breath long enough. So you can give me a shot that gives me oxygen cells into my heart that allows me to double the capacity of my holding my breath, that would be a wonderful type of tool to have inside me. And there are some kind of ideas like this where you would be able to just take a shot and all of a sudden you can stay underwater 5-7 minutes. That's the kind of transhumanism that I'm really interested in. The same thing, I would love to explore the stars. So if it means becoming more cyborg-like, to get off planet, to be able to deal with different atmospheres, that's another very, strong, I think, reason to embrace transhumanism. I think another thing is because so many people die, like my father. My father's issue was really that he had a biological heart, and biological hearts are limited. However, if you have an artificial heart, it might be able to go, 10 times longer, and then it can be replaced. And I don't think it would actually change my father's personality in any way to have had the artificial heart. But we're not there yet with these technologies. We're quite close on many of them. So, But I think in that way, this is where transhumanism holds the most promise. It's really not about changing the human being into something it's not. It's really about just bettering the human spirit through technology so that we can do all the things we always want to do, like surf a 100-foot wave, but not worry about drowning.
I love it. I'm going to share with you a statement I heard by a Christian scientist who said because I'll tell you what, there's two schools of thought. I met two different camps out there. One camp says technology's bad. We're trying to play God. This other guy I met, his name's Dr. Fuzz. He's actually a scientist. He says we should play God. His and I'm like, what? He said, listen, God created, and I know you're an atheist, that's okay, but just hear me for a second. He says that God created us in his image. We are supposed to try to explore, create. That's a God thing. What do you think about that? In other words, is this camp, I kind of see them as hypocrites, meaning, okay, what? Do you not have medicine in your body? Do you not, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think anyone doesn't use technology today. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think we should play God, though. I got to be honest, like, as someone in the public realm, I'm starting to not use those kinds of words and those semantics because they simply upset too many people. What I would say is let us use technology to make ourselves in the best image possible. And I believe if God is looking upon us, and there is such a thing as God, he or she would be very, very proud of us, because we are trying to aspire to be something like God. Something much higher than we are. And if we're doing it in a moral way, using our reasoning, which of course would have been something that was God-given, then I think it would be great. And I think, it's all in kind of the language and in the way we talk about it. I think when you talk about, like, for example, one of the topics I've been discussing in Oxford recently is quantum archaeology. It's this idea that you use 3D bioprinting and reverse engineering of subatomic matter. It's a lot to fill in, but basically you can technologically resurrect people from the past as a result of taking a certain part of the universe, reverse engineering it, and then 3D bioprinting it out, meaning that we might be able to 3D bioprint out every single person who has ever lived in the future in, let's say, 100 or 200 or 300 years. And we call this technological resurrection or quantum archaeology. The reason, though, that this is important is that this might be the exact technology that, let's say, Jesus would use if he was to someday come back down on planet Earth and resurrect people, those who are good. And I think it's absolutely okay to aspire to bring this technology. In fact, maybe if he returns, he will be happy that we have already provided this technology, these machines. So, it's just how you look at it. Again, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's bad. I'm not saying people need to go out there and do this, but discovering this technology and using it for good to maybe a child who died in a terrible car accident from a drunk driver, that's in giving that child a chance to life. Now, that could be a very noble cause.
Interesting. So I saw your Amazon Prime, and I highly recommend it, just because I believe we're supposed to use our brains. And I think that a lot of people today don't think about deep issues. And I think your documentary challenged my thinking. So what's it called again?
Immortality or Bust.
Immortality or Bust. And you can see it on Amazon Prime.
Yes, and a lot of other places, Apple and whatnot. So you can any outlets that you can find it, or you have.
And you also wrote a book, and
yes.
Is it called the Transhumanist Wager?
Yes, the Transhumanist Wager. And I have about 7 other nonfiction books, mostly my essays and major media. It's a Zoltan Istvan, a futurist collection. Everything's on Amazon. Yes, so we have a lot of stuff out there to read.
What do you hope? I know we have just about less than 10 minutes left, but what do you hope happens next? Because I've kind of seen where you've gone. You did this, some people would say, crazy thing in 2016. Did you run again in 2020?
I ran directly against Donald Trump just because I thought I would have preferred to have a different candidate for the Republican Party. I'm not really a party guy, but I did run directly against him just because I was a little worried about America. It's really not an anti-Trump issue. It's much more that I just felt like we could have better candidates that actually united the country more. It's just sad that somehow politics becomes so polarized that if you're on the left or the right, you can't have friends anymore in between. And I would love a candidate to emerge and just be like, I'm a good guy for everybody. I'm just trying to do the best for the country. So I did run in 2020. I think I got 6th in the Republican primaries. And I also ran for governor in California on the Libertarian Party. I was the endorsed candidate, and I think we got 15th there and didn't do so well, but we did good enough. But I think the main thing with politics is I have never anticipated winning, at least not yet. Maybe I will one day. But it's really a way to bring science to the forefront of politics. As you know, like, for example, the biggest topic in the world in the last month or 2 months has been ChatGPT and AI. And yet we really don't have our President Biden or any of the politicians addressing it in a real way. And yet this is such a monumental innovation, probably comparative to the internet, and will be at least in the next few years. And yet we don't have politicians discussing it because it's just kind of dangerous. They can lose voters over it. But this is where having a science candidate be able to freely speak his mind about the challenges, the promise of it, would be really useful. I wish we could get more people that would be honest and upfront about science and technology in our world, rather than just kind of pushing it to the background, because I feel like ChatGPT is already starting to take so many jobs and will continue to take jobs.
So I sense that you're saying that technology is something that needs to be seriously considered and integrated into our lives. And politics, at least historically, has chosen not, for the most part, to integrate cutting edge topics for fear of losing votes. And so you running really is a way to kind of like push this back to the forefront.
Yeah. And I will run again too. I'm just not sure. Probably won't be 2024, but it might be 2020. And actually, I was at Oxford. One of the complaints was I didn't have a graduate degree. So I thought, okay, I'll go back. Then I'll have my fancy graduate degree, and maybe I'll be better, more seriously taken. And of course, by then, in 5-7 years from now, there'll be a lot more technology issues to address, as there already are from 2016. When I ran on a kind of life extension ticket, everybody said, oh, this is crazy. And there was barely only a few $1 billion even flowing into the life extension industry. Today, there's about 250 billion, and that's going to be moving towards $1 trillion here over the next 7 to 10 years. So it's really gone from a few $1 billion of research to going to be $1 trillion within a decade. So I can tell you that these ideas that I was discussing 2016, they're coming to pass. Yeah. And you actually even saw it with COVID, the way that we were able to actually create vaccines in a very quick manner was something that I think shocked a lot of scientists that didn't even know about RNA technology and whatnot. And it doesn't matter if you're for or against the science or for or against vaccines. What matters is that I think people don't realize how fast science, biosciences and artificial intelligence, genetic editing, stem cells, cyborgism, these things are coming. In 10 years, it could easily be the case that you and I decide to do this podcast, another one, either through a headset or something that's just maybe a laser coming from the ceiling that's putting these images in front of us. But I can assure you that the technology is going to be so dramatically different than what we have now that it will be shocking. And that's kind of the nature of science, of the evolution, kind of Moore's law, the evolution of the microprocessor, is it doesn't just go like this in a linear way. It actually goes in a J curve. And we're starting to see some incredible technologies come through the pipeline. And it's very scary because politics isn't changing. Culture isn't changing. The sport, for example, of soccer isn't changing, but technology is changing so rapidly. And so I think this is where more than ever, we need leaders who understand science and are also willing to really talk about it openly. Whether they're for it or against it is not the question. The question is just to be able to speak about it openly, as kind of you and I are doing right now.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, I am so honored that you came onto the show today. And truly the reason why I brought you on is because I think that in my community, I think Christians need to talk about technology because we're using it every day. I mean, like technology, wearables, I mean, it's around us every day. And for us to just say, well, my faith and technology shouldn't mix, I think that that's unwise. And I think that you're someone who's in a good way forcing, or I should say, facilitating the conversation. And I think that that's noble. And just like I'm studying your stuff, man, maybe offline we'll chat some other time. But I enjoy what you're doing. And any last thoughts, man? Because I know you're finishing your grad degree. Yeah.
I just think what you said is really important. And early in my career, I was kind of pretty atheistic, but then I sort of changed agnostic, partially because the science has grown so complex, even I can't figure out it anymore. But I think what's really important is what you said is, you've seen, for example, Catholicism, and I was raised a Catholic, no longer Catholic, but that's a population base that's declining, at least in the Western world. Maybe it's increasing in some places in Africa, but definitely declining in the Western world. And the Pope have made a couple decisions, the last few popes, in trying to be a little bit more inclusive of what is happening in the modern world to build back their numbers. And I feel like for Christians, this is really important. If Christians want their religion to remain relevant, then they're going to have to deal with relevant topics that are affecting their lives. And nothing is really more relevant than technology. So I couldn't agree with you more that even if Christians don't like transhumanism, they may want to incorporate the best components of it into their faith and into their lifestyles in order to not lose the influence that they have right now. And again, I'm just speaking practically, almost from a political point of view. Yeah. So it makes perfect sense what you're saying, that it's best not to shy away from the conversation. If you don't like some of it, don't include some of it, but you're going to like some of it, and probably best to include those parts in order to try to hold on to your base and also maybe even grow the base larger with transhumanism. It sounds crazy, but I think it's like you said, it's if you really believe that, God gave these gifts to human beings, then these human beings should probably use these gifts. And what's greater than the gift of science and rationality and the scientific
Yeah.
method. These are all things that I'm pretty sure if there's a God up there, he would have wanted us to use it.
Listen, man, this was very stimulating. I told my whole team, I'm like, this is one you got to listen to. We're going to put this, yes, it's on Facebook. Yes, we recorded it, but we're also going to put it many other places, YouTube, etc. But this was fantastic. I do agree with you that age reversal is you mentioned the money, and I agree that it's being, but you know, David Sinclair, Peter Diamandis, all these people, age reversal is becoming very significant. So I think it's all relevant. And Zoltan, thank you so much for exploring this and using your brain to process some of this for us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Take care, my friend. We'll see you.
All right. Thank you.